the chairman of the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for this hearing. Thanks for the kind words. You'll have to put up with me for another 12 months or so, but those were very kind words. You know, during the entirety of my long congressional career, 35 years, Intercity Rail has had funding starts and stops, you know, threats to be disbanded, endured the whims of our annual appropriation process. No way to run a railroad, shall we say, in terms of being able to strategically plan for the investments you need to improve service, to provide additional service, to acquire new power and new train sets. There's someone's isn't muted out there, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Can you please mute your lines? Thank you.
Trading gone up, 96 hours gone up, don't campaign.
Members, please mute.
Mr. Cohen.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. Don't know what was going on there. In any case, you know, the enactment of the Passenger Rail Improvement Act in 08 began to provide a little more certainty, but the states anticipated a federal partner with about $90 million a year. But then that number shot up to $8 billion with the passage of the American Recovery Reinvestment Act, an additional $2.5 billion the following year. But then it dropped off again, and then it climbed up again during the FAST Act when Congress authorized hundreds of millions more. But that has caused, you know, Amtrak to limp along with, again, not being capable to look at reasonably expanding service and then look at, you know, plans to rebuild the network and to repower although they are in the process of acquiring new power and train sets. So the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act is revolutionary in my very long tenure in Congress, 35 years, in that there's guaranteed and robust funding for the next 5 years. $66 billion in appropriated reliable funds and another $35 billion in authorizations, which, you know, will not necessarily be easy, but the authorization is there. The appropriated funds in this bill are 6 times the amount we did under the FAST Act, and the FAST Act was pretty good for rail comparing to what we've been doing. And you know, this will be way bigger, and it provides competitive grant funding for states to lead the development, new and expanded corridors, incentivize interstate compacts, creates inventories of projects in the Northeast corridor for major infrastructure investments, bridges, stations, tunnels. Don mentioned a 111-year-old tunnel. Well, the tunnel under Baltimore is 149 years old. And if you go through in the viewing car, you can see that it's raining inside because of the leaking water mains, and it's brick. How long is that mortar going to hold? We had great engineers in the late 1800s, apparently, but these things don't last forever. And if that tunnel goes down, it'll be disastrous for freight and passenger movement in the northeastern United States. And the costs over the time to build an alternate under the river or there far exceed the cost of making the investment and getting ahead of the problem. You know, these are investments that we should be making. And you know, I also supported the idea of Amtrak doing additional investments in intercity passenger rail, particularly looking at city pairs where they could, you know, it used to be everybody took the shuttle to New York from here. Now a vast number of people prefer to take the train. And that's just one city pair route. There are many others around the country, somewhat longer than that, where you could divert people from the highways, where you could divert people from the inconvenience of commuter air. By the time you go to the airport, go through security, get on the plane, get delayed, you know, get off the plane, get, you know, wherever you're going from the airport. So I think there's tremendous potential there, both to deal with greenhouse gas reduction, congestion, and quality of life for the American people. We had a great testimony earlier this year from the Virginia Secretary of State. I don't know if it'll change now the Republicans have taken over. Maybe they'll go back to doing things the old way, which doesn't work. There were plans to build 2 more lanes on 95, take about 10 years, cost $12 billion. And the projections were, when they finished it, it would be as congested as it is today. It's called induced demand. Build it and they will come. They came to a novel agreement with CSX to provide a new rail route, essentially or partially a new rail route with a new rail bridge over the river here in DC for a lesser cost. And it's going to be able to, ameliorate the commute time of, many people and move them much more fuel efficiently. Hopefully that'll stick. I tried to, in the INVEST Act, say that before building major highway projects, states and cities had to look at whether or not rail transit alternatives could solve the problems better. Unfortunately, that was stripped out by the Senate. They considered, considering anything other than building more highways to be problematic. But it doesn't work. I had a number as we were doing the bill. I can't remember how many tens of thousands of miles were built in our inner cities in the last 30 years, and they're more congested than ever. We've got to look at these sorts of viable alternatives. But the other key thing we're going to need, like happened in the case with Virginia, is cooperation with the freights. We have the greatest freight network in the world, and we don't want to jeopardize that. It's the second most efficient way to move cargo after water. So we want to encourage it. But the point is, the law is pretty clear. Preference over freight transportation, except in an emergency, intercity and commuter rail passenger transportation provided for Amtrak has preference over freight transportation in using a rail line junction crossing unless the board orders otherwise under this subsection. Well, obviously that has not been observed, and that is of concern. As the trains get longer and longer, I got Chrissy funds to help build a siding so we could move trains more efficiently between Eugene and Portland, Oregon. It takes about over 3 hours. It's 110 miles. Now the length of the trains UP is going to run are going to be too long for the siding, which is, there's got to be some compromise here that can both better utilize the rights of way or utilize reserved rights of way that the railroads aren't using now, somehow something that's mutually beneficial, as it was for CSX in Virginia, because they got access to new rail bridge and the other rail bridge is at 99%. I think there are places around the country where that could happen, and I'm hoping that this amount of funding and a new attitude on the part of freight to sit down and actually talk will move us in that direction. So I look forward to hearing about the plans for the witnesses in the hearing today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And once again, I want to say, wish you well in your next chapter. You've been a true inspiration for me and your leadership of this committee. So thank you. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. Mr. Stephen Gardner, President of Amtrak. And at this point in time, I'd like to yield to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Napolitano, to introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It gives me great pleasure and I'm honored to introduce David Kim, Secretary of California Transportation Agency. Many of our colleagues are familiar with Mr. Kim's distinguished career, having worked for the Federal Highway Administration, the Governor of California, the Mayor of Los Angeles, and our former colleague, Mr. Becerra. Mr. Kim has been a transformative leader of our state's transportation agency, working very hard for our local communities to reduce congestion, improve freight movement, and provide for a cleaner transportation system. And by the way, I may mention he has been very accessible to me. Thank you, Mr. Kim, for your work on behalf of our state and for your testimony today. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back. Our next witness is Mr. Kevin Corbett, President and CEO of New Jersey Transit and co-chair of the Northeast Corridor Commission, and he's here on behalf of the Northeast Corridor Commission, a gentleman that I work very closely with and is a great leader of that organization. And then we have Ms. Julie White, Deputy Secretary of Multimodal Transportation, North Carolina, Department of Transportation, and Commission Chair of the Southern Corridor Commission. Next, we have Ms. Donna DiMartino, Managing Director, Los Angeles, San Diego, and St. Louis Obispo Rail Corridor Agency. Sorry, I kind of tore that up. And last but not least, Mr. Knox Ross, Mississippi Commissioner and Chair of the Southern Rail Commission. Thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to your testimony. Without objection, our witnesses' full statements will be included in the record. Since your written testimony has been made part of the record, subcommittee requests that you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. Mr. Gardner, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman DeFazio, Chairman Payne, Ranking Member Crawford, members of the subcommittee, and my fellow witnesses. I'm Amtrak President Stephen Gardner, and thank you for inviting me to testify today. Let me begin by acknowledging Chairman DeFazio for his years of public service and thanking him for being a huge champion of Amtrak. His work has shaped the nation for decades. With the enactment of this historic bipartisan infrastructure law, it will continue to do so for many years to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll sorely miss your leadership as you leave Congress. For the past 50 years, Amtrak has described to Congress how intercity passenger rail could substantially benefit the nation if it only received the adequate and reliable funding it needed like other modes. Today, I'd like to say something different. Thank you. Thank you for helping to enact this law and create a new era of rail mobility that can support our nation's economic and environmental goals. With the $66 billion provided to the Federal Railroad Administration and Amtrak, we and our partners can finally have the chance to renew, improve, or replace antiquated assets like the century-old bridges and tunnels in the Northeast, inaccessible stations around the nation, and our vintage trains. With these funds, advancing long-stalled projects like the Gateway Program with my good friend Kevin Corbett, replacement of our legacy fleets that serve states like North Carolina and California, and investing in core IT and maintenance facilities that support the whole network will finally be possible. In addition to modernizing our assets, the bipartisan infrastructure law also creates a process for the FRA to identify and provide grants to enhance intercity corridor routes across the nation. With strong state rail planning in place and Amtrak's own nationwide vision of corridor expansion released earlier this year, there are many great investment opportunities for the FRA to consider. I would note the reintroduction of Gulf Coast service, the development of California's Coachella Valley service, and the activation of the Raleigh to Petersburg S-Line routes as prime examples. Amtrak looks forward to partnering with the states, Deputy Administrator Bose, Secretary Buttigieg, host railroads, and others to bring more intercity service to more people across America. And we know that critical to the success of this is the update of the Section 209 cost-sharing policy required by the new law. We understand that states need more predictability and control of their cost structure under this policy, and we're committed to work with our partners to update this paradigm for the new era. Additionally, we'll continue to work collaboratively with our partners where they see value in working with other parties to deliver parts of their service, and with new railroad entities that aim to develop or deliver their own service. We simply ask that key railroad laws like the Railway Labor Act and railroad retirement apply to new entrants, that the federal government gets equity and accountability for investments it makes in private systems, and that any new services create connections with Amtrak's national network. As exciting as the bipartisan infrastructure law is, there are some challenges that we and our partners will have to face in the coming years. I'd like to highlight a few today. First, while getting ready to launch this new era, we must continue to survive the pandemic. We've now just achieved about 70% of our historic ridership levels and restored most of our services. But the Omicron variant demonstrates the pandemic is far from over, and we must continue to drive the health and safety measures needed to protect passengers and employees. A critical component of those measures is our employee vaccine mandate. As we implement this requirement, we're hopeful that many of the roughly 5% of our workforce that has yet to get vaccinated will do so by our deadline of January 4th, which aligns with the federal contractor mandate. In case that doesn't occur, however, we anticipate proactively needing to temporarily reduce some train frequencies across our network in January to avoid staffing-related cancellations, with our plan to fully restore all frequencies by March or as soon as we have qualified employees available. We'll keep this subcommittee apprised of the situation as we learn more about employee compliance over the next week. Further, in order to effectively implement the infrastructure bill, we and our partners will need to significantly grow and broaden our workforce and supplier base. We're anxious to partner with our labor unions and others to develop new employees and build a more diverse group of suppliers in the communities that we serve. Finally, while the legislation contains very important planning provisions meant to guide network investment, we're also concerned that the current framework could restrict the state's and Amtrak's ability to quickly advance projects that are ready to go now. We look forward to working with the FRA, NEC Commission, states, and Congress to work through these challenges. I will end my remarks by once again saying thank you to the members of this subcommittee and to you, Chairman Payne. With the funds provided by the infrastructure bill and your support moving forward, Amtrak and our state and commuter partners' vision for a modern passenger rail network can finally become a reality. While Amtrak will still require annual appropriations to fund our basic operations and capital expense, the funds dedicated to address the deferred backlog and support network growth in this bill will forever change the course of our industry. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. And it looks like we're finally getting to a point where Amtrak will finally receive the dollars that it was promised 50 years ago. And I've been an advocate on reiterating that over my time here in Congress. And it looks like we finally made it. So we look forward to the new prospects for Amtrak. Next, we will hear from Mr. Kim. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Good morning, Chairman DeFazio, Chairman Payne, Ranking Member Crawford, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to testify. And Congressman Napolitano, thank you so much for the kind introduction. And it's great to see you. And thanks to all members of the committee for your leadership in securing passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which, as previously noted, provides record levels of federal investment for intercity rail. The first point I'd like to make at the outset is that California's sustainable transportation strategy is based largely on reducing vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions by shifting passenger transportation from highways to rail. We're also aggressively supporting the development of clean, zero-emission technologies. The IIJA will support climate-friendly policies California has led the nation in developing. These policies are the driving force behind the 2018 California State Rail Plan, which establishes a long-term vision for prioritizing state rail investment. Just by way of background, California's passenger rail system includes Amtrak National Network long-distance routes, as well as state-supported intercity passenger trains, along with locally supported commuter and urban rail services. Amtrak long-distance routes that serve both California and interstate markets include the California Zephyr, Coast Starlight, Sunset Limited, and Southwest Chief. We greatly value these services, which connect many of California's smaller communities to the rest of the state and nation. Meanwhile, our state-supported routes include the Pacific Surfliner, San Joaquin's, and Capitol Corridor. Together, they make up nearly 20% of Amtrak's entire ridership. I want to point out that California funds and owns most of the equipment used on the 3 state-supported intercity rail routes, which are managed by regional joint powers authorities. California greatly appreciates the $16 billion in the IIJA for Amtrak's national network, which can be used to upgrade California Amtrak stations and other facilities to full ADA compliance. Funds can also be used to rehabilitate and replace old Amtrak-owned fleet and facilities, and conduct corridor development activities. Amtrak has also expressed a desire to conduct corridor development, starting with the LA, Phoenix, Tucson route. Amtrak is supporting efforts by Caltrans, Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency, and the Riverside County Transportation Commission to expand service into the Coachella Valley as a supporting project to the broader goal of increasing rail service between California and Arizona. We also appreciate the significant expansion and reform of the federal-state partnership for intercity passenger rail program. The new law provides $36 billion, with at least $12 billion available for projects outside the Northeast Corridor. This will boost California's state funding programs, which are investing heavily in corridor expansion to operate more frequent service and extend our corridors. I want to emphasize that federal rail funding provided to California is not just an investment, it's a partnership. Federal funding supports significant state, local, and private rail investments that are already being made throughout the state. As noted in the state rail plan, $20 billion for California rail projects is needed through 2027 and $119 billion through 2040. We have already delivered more than $4.7 billion since 2015 for projects that benefit intercity rail, but only $150 million came from federal sources. State and local rail funding comes from a wide variety of programs, including local sales tax measures, California's biennial state transportation improvement program, the State Rail Assistance Program created by California's landmark SB1, and other competitive programs. Just a few weeks ago, my agency issued a call for projects for the upcoming round of grants from the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, TIRCP. This program funds rail and transit capital projects that reduce GHG emissions, VMT, and congestion. Since 2015, we have awarded $5.8 billion to 73 projects with a total value of over $26 billion. We are also leading the nation in transitioning to zero-emission intercity rail by 2035. Our state budget that was enacted just a few months ago includes $3.9 billion to accelerate the state's zero-emission vehicle goals. And we already have initiatives underway. For example, Caltrans is rolling out renewable diesel to the entire intercity fleet. And we're also going to deploy zero-emission multiple unit train sets using both hydrogen fuel cells and electric batteries. I also want to point out that we are also advancing sustainability goals by supporting privately financed and developed electric high-speed rail. Brightline West is planning to build a high-speed system connecting Las Vegas with both Rancho Cucamonga and Palmdale. Last year, I authorized Caltrans to enter into a lease agreement allowing Brightline West to use state right-of-way along Interstate 15 for high-speed rail service. Finally, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, construction on the nation's first truly high-speed rail project continues to show steady progress. The California High-Speed Rail Authority is advancing construction in the Central Valley, extending to Merced and Bakersfield, and completing environmental work for the entire 500-mile system. Today in the Central Valley, there are 35 different work sites along 119 miles of construction. More than 6,000 jobs have been created. 635 certified small businesses working on the project, including—
Please wrap it up. Please wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. Okay, so in closing, we are excited about the future of intercity passenger rail in California and the prospect of expanding services throughout the state, thanks to the IIJA. Thank you again, and I look forward to working with the subcommittee and the administration to make transformative investments that will deliver the next generation of American intercity passenger rail.
Thank you. The witness's time has expired. We'll next hear from Mr. Corbett for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Payne. As always, a pleasure to be with you. And thank you to Vice Chair Strickland, Ranking Member Crawford, and the members of the committee for inviting me to discuss the significance of President Biden's Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, especially as it relates to the critical infrastructure along the Northeast Corridor between Washington, D.C. and Boston. I serve as the president and CEO of New Jersey Transit, but today I'll be speaking mainly in my capacity as co-chair of the Northeast Corridor Commission, where I serve alongside my fellow co-chair, FRA Deputy Administrator Amit Bose, and my good friend and colleague, Stephen Gardner, who is vice chair of the commission, president of Amtrak. It's almost impossible to overstate the importance of this stretch of transportation infrastructure. Not only do the millions of commuters and intercity rail customers rely on it, but to our national economy. Every year, the region served by the Northeast Corridor provides more than 24 million jobs and produces about 20% of the nation's GDP. This historic investment provides a sizable down payment to allow the commission members to rebuild and modernize the Northeast Corridor to provide better, faster, more frequent, and more reliable service to the millions of commuters and intercity travelers who depend on it every year. And to be clear, the Northeast Corridor Commission, representing each of the 9 NEC states, as well as the District of Columbia, Amtrak, and the U.S. Department of Transportation, is ready to put these investments to work. This summer, the Commission unanimously took a significant step forward towards this goal through the launch of an innovative new plan, Connect NEC 2035, known as C35. C35 is our roadmap for how this generational investment for rail should be invested along the corridor, and it is the most ambitious and transformational reinvestment program in the NEC's history. C35 establishes a detailed and efficient sequencing of infrastructure investments covering over 150 projects, along with a comprehensive renewal program for state of good repair projects, including track, signal, and power systems. The total cost of C35 is currently estimated to be approximately $117 billion over 15 years, with a $100 billion funding gap. The infrastructure bill provides a significant down payment that will leverage progress on this imperative work up and down the corridor. C35 won't simply rebuild the existing Northeast Corridor, it will build back better with investments that translate to faster, more frequent, and more reliable commuter and intercity rail service. C35 will allow for the number of daily NEC Amtrak trains to grow by a third and will allow us at New Jersey Transit, for example, to more than double our peak hour service. Travel time will be nearly 30 minutes shorter for Acela riders traveling from Washington to New York and New York to Boston. In my written testimony I have submitted to the committee, I highlighted the Hudson River Tunnel and a number of other projects that NJ Transit is supporting as it relates to C35. So in the interest of time, I won't list them individually now, but it's fair to say that no one knows more painfully than New Jersey about the far-reaching negative impact that prolonged disinvestment can have on a transit system. And similar to what Governor Murphy's unprecedented investment had done for New Jersey and New Jersey Transit over the past 4 years, President Biden's historic investment will do the same for the nation's transportation network, including the entire Northeast Corridor. Beyond New Jersey Transit and in projects up and down, the Northeast Corridor will benefit from this new federal funding. For example, as been touched upon, the nearly 150-year-old Baltimore and Potomac Tunnel, just south of Baltimore's Penn Station, is indeed Amtrak's oldest tunnel, and as touched upon is the aging components that require constant monitoring and maintenance, representing a significant single point of failure that could sever service between Washington and New York. Capacity there will triple, and instead of 30 miles per hour, trains will reach over 100 miles per hour in the new tunnel. Another example is in Connecticut, where Amtrak and its project partners, Connecticut DOT, are working to replace the Connecticut River Bridge between Old Saybrook and Old Lyme, which carries Amtrak and Shoreline East trains. The frequent opening and closing of the 114-year-old bridge over 3,000 times per year puts high demand on its aging components, increasing maintenance costs for Amtrak and reducing reliability for both railway and marine traffic. Full replacement of these existing bridges will increase reliability and allow for increased speeds. All of these projects and many more are expected to create 1.7 million jobs over the 15-year plan and generate billions in economic activity. What we also seize on this opportunity to maximize the contracting opportunities for disadvantaged business enterprises. Mr. Chairman, the NEC Commission is wholly committed to this goal, and our commission policy explicitly states all commission members share the goal of enhancing the participation of DBEs and similar entities. Speak for NJ Transit, our agency boasts the highest DBE goal in the region at nearly 22%. And as co-chair of the NEC Commission, I want to assure you that the commission will prioritize contracting opportunities for DBEs throughout the investment. To be sure, this is an exciting time for the Northeast Corridor, but we must be clear-eyed and realistic about the road in front of us. NEC agencies, including NJ Transit, will need time to build the organizational capacity to advance project pipeline and deliver projects, including detailed planning and engineering required.
Please wrap up.
Sure, we will certainly work with our partners in labor and the private sector to hire and train the significant new workforce. To wrap up, I want to thank President Biden for his commitment to investing in the nation's transportation infrastructure, particularly in Northeast Corridor, and also want to thank New Jersey's entire congressional delegation for their leadership and support. And lastly, I would like to thank Chair DeFazio as well for his tremendous support and bringing us to this point, and certainly look forward to working with him for the rest of the year. So again, thank you, Chairman Payne, Vice Chair Strickland, and Member Crawford for your time today.
Thank you. The witness's time has expired. We will next hear from Ms. White for 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman DeFazio, Chairman Payne, Ranking Member Crawford, and members of the subcommittee for holding this hearing to discuss passenger rail as an integral part of our national transportation system. My name is Julie White. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Multimodal Transportation for the North Carolina Department of Transportation, with oversight of our rail, aviation, ferry, public transit, bicycle, and pedestrian divisions. I'm also the chair of the Southeast Corridor Commission, a regional partnership made up of North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Virginia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida. The Southeast Corridor Commission is leading the effort to connect states across the Southeast megaregion through passenger and freight rail. The Commission is charged with developing the Southeast Regional Rail Plan, reporting on the economic benefits of rail along the corridor, creating an implementation plan, and prioritizing major projects. The goal of this effort is to improve the mutual cooperation and planning between states and stakeholders to position the corridor to receive direct federal funding. Our states work together to advance our shared vision for high-performance rail throughout the Southeast, because we have a shared understanding of the power of rail to connect our states and our communities. And equally important, we know that rail infrastructure investments create economic growth and opportunity. The Commission is now looking to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to provide the federal funding needed to continue our work together and to advance our plans to construction, as well as initial operating support. North Carolina and Virginia, with the support of the FRA, Amtrak, and our freight rail partners, have a long history of partnership to advance development of the S-Line from Raleigh to Richmond. As you can see on the map, the S-Line, highlighted in yellow, is the key connection from the Northeast Corridor to the Southeast. I would note for you that the blue line to the right of the S-Line is CSX's main freight line. Therefore, advancing passenger rail on the S-Line rather than the freight line ensures that freight traffic is not impeded by passenger growth. This is a key example of the way we work to identify win-win opportunities that benefit both freight and passenger rail. The planning for this corridor dates back decades and has progressed through federal and state investment. North Carolina and Virginia have already completed the necessary environmental work for the entire Raleigh to Richmond corridor, and we are working toward detailed design. This step will pave the way for construction, including all new track and signal systems and safety projects that will have immediate benefits through roadway crossing grade separations and closures. Virginia has acquired the S-Line within their state, and North Carolina, through an FRA grant, is actively working with CSX, our strong partner, to acquire the corridor in our state. The S-Line will be developed as a high-performance passenger rail line that will improve rail travel times by over an hour, connect urban and rural communities, and offer freight benefits by not growing passenger rail on high-volume freight lines. We are jointly working to determine how to advance this critical link on the Eastern Seaboard through the IIJA. We have defined incremental development phases, both large and small, to be ready to maximize federal dollars to construct and implement new passenger rail service. We are also examining how we can improve project delivery to get the line into service faster. Often it takes too long to build infrastructure, and innovative project delivery is a must. The North Carolina DOT has a robust engagement process with our DBE partners and are working with our Office of Civil Rights to host webinars focused on the infrastructure bill and how small minority-owned firms can be prepared and ready to take advantage of the resulting construction that will come. The one we had yesterday was very well attended, and we look forward to doing more in the future. What I hope you take away from my testimony today is that the Southeast Corridor Commission and the state of North Carolina are committed to continuing our strong partnership with Congress, the FRA, the freight railroads, Amtrak, and others to expand passenger and freight rail in the Southeast. The IIJA is a historic opportunity to build upon our joint work to date, connect urban and rural communities, and provide our residents with additional mobility and access to jobs in the economy. We thank Congress for the bold action and the IIJA level of investment in rail and we stand ready with our partners to expand our nation's high-performance passenger rail systems. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you very much. And now we will hear from Ms. DiMartino.
Yes, good morning, Chairman Payne, Ranking Member Crawford, and members of this esteemed subcommittee. My name is Donna DiMartino, and I'm the Managing Director of the Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency, and I'm honored to join you here today. It is also a pleasure to join Secretary Kim this morning. We appreciate his leadership and the strong working relationship we maintain with the California State Transportation Agency as we work together to plan, implement, and fund state-supported intercity passenger rail services. The historic IIJA will be an important part of our future. I would like to mention the other two California state-supported intercity passenger rail agencies, the Capital Corridor and the San Joaquins. We are proud that our three services all rank in the top 6 Amtrak state-supported ridership. The Lausanne Rail Corridor Agency is a joint powers authority comprised of rail owners, operators, and planning agencies along the Lausanne Rail Corridor. As a joint powers authority, we empower local stakeholders, taxpayers, and communities with greater control and oversight of their intercity passenger rail services. The Surfliner provides service between San Diego, Los Angeles, and San Luis Obispo, and is the highest ridership state-supported service in the United States. Pre-pandemic, the Pacific Surfliner carried over 2.75 million passengers, and the Lausanne Corridor ranked as the second busiest intercity passenger rail corridor in the United States, behind only the Northeast Corridor. As a state-supported service, our operations are funded by the state of California, and we make payments to Amtrak, the operator of our services, as governed by the Section 209 cost formula. We are very proud of our outstanding fare box recovery rate of over 75%, but we still receive nearly $35 million in operating support from the state of California. Many of the most prominent corridors and routes mentioned for potential expansion or return to service are under 750 miles, which means they would also be state-supported services. As a successful state-supported route, I would like to share some recommendations and lessons learned. States must prioritize and build relationships with railroad stakeholders, particularly freight railroads and railway labor. Sustained state and local political support is essential to growing intercity passenger rail services. Comprehensive long-range planning is important to ensure the sustainability of our operations. Transparent and traceable cost information is necessary to inform investment and operating decisions. And finally,